The Dallas Cowboys have missed out on all of the top available running backs, but is that a bad thing? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $200 if your bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, it's a 30-minute breakdown of Trent Sieg, the Cowboys' big free agent. No, we're not talking about long snappers. We are talking about what the Cowboys have not done in free agency, and that's anything. They haven't done anything really of day. They've missed out on all of the top running backs. Landon, what's your read on what the Cowboys are doing or aren't doing after one day of free agency?
They're doing pretty much exactly what we expected them to do. This is the plan. This is what they've been doing. They just don't participate in the first few days of free agency, first few weeks, really, in some spots. Obviously the huge Trent Sieg signing, notwithstanding, they basically are going to sit on their hands here and see what kind of deals. There's been some rumors about some spots that they may have kicked some tires on, and I think that honestly, just hearing the rumors of them kicking tires is really just all it's up is stirring a hornet's nest in Cowboys Nation that there's even consideration that the Cowboys would consider spending money, but. I think right now they're trying to get a lay of the land on what the market is looking like. The running back market specifically kind of came out a little bit wonkier than we expected, right? So I think they're kind of trying to get a lay of the land of exactly how that's going to settle in. And then once a baseline has been established for average unrestricted free agent running back, I think that's when they're going to start looking at what their options are, who's still left available, what do they have in the draft, and who's available via trade.
Yeah, so according to Pro Football Focus, the top 11 running backs that were available have all agreed to deals within 24 hours of free agency opening. So you talked about the Cowboys looking at the lay of the land of the running back position. Like it's gone. Like we're at the spot where if none of these players sign until May, it won't be surprising at all. Like that's just the talent level that's available. And you mentioned the Cowboys being interested in a player. Let's dive into that because we got a report from Michael Gelkin yesterday of the Dallas Morning News that the Cowboys were interested in Zach Moss, the former Colts and Bills running back, who did go up and sign a deal with the Cincinnati Bengals, 2 years, $8 million. And what was funny is in the tweet from Michael Gelkin, it said that was out of the Cowboys' price range. $4 million a year was out of what the Cowboys were willing to pay Zach Moss. I understand what he was saying. It's also kind of funny at the same time. It's incredible content.
Yes, I mean, I think the people in their anger completely just started yelling at their screens before reading that last line more than they were willing to pay Zach Moss. And I think that they just took it as the Cowboys aren't going to even spend $4 million at the running back position, period. What are they doing? And then setting their computers on fire. I think that last sentence really is the kicker there. That they didn't want to spend more than that much money on Zach Moss. I think they may have other caps for other players. But that's the thing too here is that like we talked about this is that there's more than one path here. And I guarantee you that the Cowboys have more than one plan here for free agency and for the running back position, right? Because there's no way that you can guarantee that you're going to be able to sign any of these specific free agents. So you must have target numbers for multiple players. And then that doesn't even mean that you're done when you've signed a free agent necessarily, right? Like that you could still supplement it with a trade with the draft pick. So I think some people read that rumor as Zach Moss is the Cowboys running back option, and they just missed out on him because they wouldn't pay him $4 million. I don't think that that's what they're doing here. I think that they would like to spend around $4 million on a veteran running back that likely will be supplemented by, a draft pick or maybe another veteran running back, that sort of thing. So I understand why people are upset, because there's just a lack of anything going on, and people tend to be upset as Cowboy fans right around now. But I do think that there is kind of a larger plan for the running back room than just, oh man, I hope we gave Zach Moss $4 million to be our running back. Oh, he didn't take it. We're out of a plan. I feel like it's more complicated.
I also wonder if the Cowboys maybe were willing to pay Zach Moss $4 million a year, but they didn't want to have it be a 2-year deal. Maybe they were interested only in a 1-year deal. And that's where this kind of came. I will say about Zach Moss really quickly before we move on. Just talking to some analytic people around the NFL and around at PFF, he's actually somebody that comes out very, very well. And it's almost more encouraging to me that we heard that he was a target of the Cowboys rather than Aaron Jones or Josh Jacobs or Saquon Barkley, because to me, it signals maybe the Cowboys are looking a little bit deeper than just name value. But also, Lane, I want to say, like, we've been talking about the idea that the Cowboys are going to reshape this running back room for a while now. And one of the things that the Cowboys were intent on doing is scaling back how much they are paying the running back position, right? They paid $10 million last year for Tony Pollard on top of $8 million a year for Ezekiel Elliott, just not to be on the team. This is what it looks like. Like if the Cowboys would have went out and spent $8 million on Aaron Jones, you're not really accomplishing anything there. You're still spending the same amount of money as you did before. This is what it looks like when you have to scale back at a few positions. And when you do that, or when you decide which positions to do that at, running back is the spot to do that, because there are going to be quality options available later. And of course, in the draft that can give you the same, if not better production.
Yeah, and I'll string another part of this out even a little bit more. A lot of you guys have heard of the analytics stat, completion percentage over expectation. There's also a rushing yards over expectation app. Same application, same sort of idea, right? That what's the average running back going to get on this play with this down and distance, and what did this player get versus what the average player, and what's the difference? And that difference is a pretty good indicator of how much better a player is than just the average running back, much like completion percentage over expectation, right? Zach Moss, I saw a stat, I think was the number 1 player in that category for free agents coming out this year. And to me, the fact that Zach Moss was the name that kind of got pulled out of this hat at that $4 million range, I'm going to, have some assumption here, and maybe I am taking a leap here, but I don't think it's that far of a leap. I think that this is John Park flexing his muscle in this organization. We talked about the fact that one of the areas that we felt like the analytics department was going to start rearing its head and flexing its muscle a little bit more this year is in the personnel department. And you start to look at things like this, like, hey, he's an analytic darling, and there's a reason maybe that the Cowboys were looking to get him at the price point that they were looking to get him, because they had determined that was a good value for what you're getting, and buying low on a player that may be on the rise. So if you want to look at it from that point of view, maybe this is a situation where the Cowboys are starting to get a little bit more analytic input on how they're selecting their free agents.
I also just don't think it's a bad idea that they avoided this running back market. I know there's a lot of names out there, but after looking at all of these deals, is there any one deal that you wish the Cowboys would have done? I mean, the only two that are at least appealing to me at all are the Tony Pollard deal. I thought the Titans got him at a very reasonable number, and then the Zach Moss. Like, that's it. I wouldn't have been interested at all at the number Saquon Barkley got. I'm not interested in what Josh Jacobs got, 4 years, $48 million. Again, I know I get that there's a lot of outrage out there, but tell me the deal that you wish the Cowboys would have done, because I just don't really see it right now.
Yeah, and that's usually the case with every free agent deal early in this thing is that you look at the name, you're excited about the number, but you don't really kind of like extrapolate it out like how would that be a fit with the Cowboys? And I do think that there were some situations of players that Cowboys fans wanted on the team, but the reality of the price point versus what they're getting, it's not a good bargain. And that's not to say that the Cowboys can't get 75% of the player on 25% of the contract, especially at the running back position, right? Like a little bit further down. So yeah, I mean, I don't really understand the ire over not being players early in free agency, especially at the running back position, where look, I mean, a lot of these guys overpaid for the players that they got, and so that's just part of it. And the Cowboys at this point, because of all the things you mentioned, they can't really necessarily afford to overpay a player that might be only 5% better than the player that you can pay at an appropriate rate maybe a week later.
All right, let's talk about the options that are still out there at running back for the Dallas Cowboys, because we know they're going to add somebody, but who might that be? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament, whether you're betting on a big upset or a number one seed. It's time to go dancing on America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That is $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who you think is going to win the entire tournament. Imagine that payoff. Go bet on who you think is going to make the Final Four. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We wanted to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, Landon, let's talk about what the Cowboys are going to do at running back now, because the options aren't great. I will give you the top options according to Pro Football Focus and their age. It's J.K. Dobbins, 25 years old, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 25, A.J. Dillon, 26, Damian Harris, 27, Deontay Foreman, 26, Rico Dowdle, 26.
Yeah, I mean, those are the free agent options, right? And then obviously they've got the draft. There's I'm assuming that some of these teams signed running backs that they're going to have a surplus of running backs, so maybe there's an option for trading someone. I think it remains to be seen exactly how they decide to kind of cobble this together. I think for me the real question is where do they plan on getting the juice at the position, right? Is that going to come from the draft? Or are you planning on kind of going to get a more specialty guy that can kind of be the jitterbug or however you want to kind of call that, the speed guy, and then maybe you sign a veteran guy who can be kind of the stabilizing physical presence? I don't know. I think it's really the assembly that I'm the most interested in. I think that some of the names that you listed out there are interesting. Especially J.K. Dobbins, like we just don't know what his health is. That's really the borderline here. But him with the ball in his hands is a special player. So, I think it's kind of the Cowboys are clearly playing a wait and see game at the running back position. They're trying to get quality running back carries at a cheap price, which is something that normally is pretty easy to do. And I think that we're being very much outly influenced by the fact that, like you mentioned, unlike almost any other position, the top 11 running backs available in the free agents have already been kind of paid a lot of money. So you're seeing these names come off the board. The Cowboys need a running back, and you're feeling this anxiety that their options are leaving, but that's not necessarily the case. There's still so many options that can be cobbled together with all the resources that are still left, including all these free agents that we just talked about. And even beyond that, the list that it definitely extends beyond the list that Marcus just read.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, like you said, all the folks that are in the draft, and then folks that we're not even thinking about that may be made available for trade at some point.
So let's go through the free agents, then we'll go through the trade market. So of those names, whether it's J.K. Dobbins, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, A.J. Dillon, Damian Harris, Deontay Foreman, which one does the most for you?
I think Dobbs does, simply because if he's healthy. Dobbins, I'm sorry. Just because if he's healthy, he's kind of the more dynamic of the back, right? And I think that's the big question there. Obviously, is the health. Outside of that, I think you mentioned Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We've talked about him before and how we thought that he would be a really good fit in the West Coast system, and just kind of with what he does would be kind of a nice mix in back. Maybe you pair him with another running back. Maybe you pair him with A.J. Dillon. I don't know. So I do think that it's about kind of figuring out the types that you want. But there's tons of kind of. There's almost a plateau of talent, really, here. Like, I don't know that I think Dobbins, maybe if he's healthy, is like a tier above the rest of these guys, but the rest of it's kind of all, the same. They're reliable veteran running backs, not necessarily something that's going to move the needle for your offense, but they're reliable, that you can get them, 15 carries a game and get 4 yards a carry behind a decent offensive line. So, that where the Cowboys need to kind of figure things out is like, where do they want to get their feature back, their special back, that's going to be kind of a guy that they're going to want to get targets because of their playmaking ability.
It's the draft. I'm just so convinced it's the draft. And listen, I understand that this is not a super strong running back class, but for where Dallas is drafting in round 2 and round 3, it's actually a good fit. Like, I'm not the biggest Jonathan Brooks fan, but I understand the appeal if you draft him at 56. I like Trey Benson a lot from Florida State. I think that's somebody who should be a second-round pick. Braylon Allen from Wisconsin, I think probably goes somewhere in the 3rd round. And I think those are all good values. I would just rather do that than overpay one of these running backs that's already got 1,000 touches in the NFL. But back to the free agent guys. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is really interesting if you want a guy that can play on the passing downs. I think he's probably the guy that has the most value, just because if you're looking for like an inside plotter, you can find those guys all over the place. You're right on J.K. Dobbins. He's fascinating. You want to guess how many career carries he has through 4 years of the NFL without looking?
I'm going to say like 150 maybe.
I mean, it's not far off. 234 through 4 seasons.
Wow, I'm surprised he even has that many, to be honest.
He does average 5.8 yards per carry. Yeah. I could see the Cowboys being interested in signing him to like a 1-year, $2 million deal with very low guarantees, with a lot of incentives, and be like, hey, come train at our facility, come get healthy. And if you're healthy, you're going to have a shot at being our starting running back. So I think he is an option as well. I'm just going to keep mentioning, I think the Cowboys will bring back Rico Dowdle, and I think they should. I thought Rico last year, whenever he was given given opportunities, he performed well. I know that he's not a every down feature running back, but I do think he gives you a really solid floor. He knows the offense. Dak knows him well. He can run behind this offensive line. I think, again, I completely understand that does not move the needle, but to me, that's a good signing that at least helps you get to the draft.
Yeah, I think it provides a nice floor. It's a guy, like you mentioned, familiar with your system, familiar with everybody in the team, familiar. He's going to know where to go on day one. He's just like another face. So you're not having to have a completely brand new, faces in the running back room besides Deuce Vaughn. It's just, I think it gives you a little bit of continuity that might be, a little bit helpful there. At least to kind of help the new guys. Hey, here's where the soda machine is. Here's where, hopefully not drinking a bunch of sodas, but here's the cafeteria. Here's the here's the training room. So just having that kind of familiarity, I think, has some minimal value. On top of the fact that, like you mentioned, I thought he was good with the ball in his hands. He's a positive player when he's on the field. And I think he can give you something in special teams as well. So yeah, I'm still very much for re-signing Rico.
All right, let's talk about some positions other than running back, because this is 2 days in a row that we've talked about the running back
And you don't
position.
love that.
No, I do not. Let's talk about what the Cowboys could do the rest of the week in free agency next. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. What's the first thing that you would do if you had an extra hour in your day? Would you go for a run? Would you take a nap? Would you read a book? Or would you show up for a friend? A lot of us spend our lives wishing that we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time wasn't unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you so that you can make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what truly matters to you so that you can go and do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's done entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for any reason at no additional charge. Find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers, on tomorrow's show, we're going to plan on answering your Twitter questions as long as the Cowboys don't blow up free agency and sign a whole bunch of players. So pretty good bet that we're going to be answering.
Pretty good bet we're doing questions tomorrow.
Yeah. Let's talk about what the plan is for the rest of the week. Do you anticipate the Cowboys going out and try to sign a center after losing Tyler Biadasz? Are you looking for them to get maybe a defensive end, bring back Tyron Smith? What do you think?
Man, I would love to hear some Tyron Smith news. I think it's probably a good sign. I guess it is, right? That we haven't really heard anything since then, right? Like since the announcement that he may not be back, I haven't really heard anything about him taking visits or other teams necessarily getting close to signing him. So, maybe there's still negotiating happening behind the scenes. Maybe they're getting closer and closer to the number that they can both like. So that's the first thing I would say is that I'm hoping for is that they figure that out, As far as center goes, it does seem like there are some veteran centers out on the market. But man, honestly, I would wait because I think they're going to get squeezed big time.
Oh yeah.
And if you want to sign, they already are. And if you want to sign a veteran center, I think the longer you wait, the better the deal is you're going to get, right? Like, because as they get closer and closer to the draft, this is, a historically good hit center class, especially at the top. There are only X amount of teams that are looking for starting centers. And if you're one of those teams, it's a really good, you're in the catbird seat, right? It's just like, it's really good, position to kind of have all that leverage. So center is definitely a position I would imagine that they kick tires on just to see what's available. But I also think that, it's going to be interesting to see if they wait until the draft to see what's available there. So I think pass rusher is another one that you mentioned. I think it's an interesting one because we've talked about it. Like the defensive end is kind of a sneaky need because of all the change there. I do think that there could be a free agent signing there, just because there is a lot of pass rushers out there, and I think that you're going to see kind of the top end guys move off the market pretty quickly. So if the Cowboys wanted to get kind of a Dante Fowler type signing, right? I think they probably need to move on that sooner than some of these other positions because the defensive end market is really, really moving. So, we've already saw Leonard Floyd get signed, Huff got signed by the Eagles. And so these guys are really kind of coming off the board. And if you're looking for a veteran guy who could come in and give you quality pass rushing snaps or just quality rotational snaps, you're probably going to want to start getting into that market sooner than later. Now that some of the top end guys have started to get their money and started to come off the board.
It's weird with the pass rushers because like we haven't seen like Danielle Hunter. I think a lot of people are waiting for like the Danielle Hunter move to see, to kind of set the market a little bit. Chase Young is still out there, and that one is really puzzling to me.
He's not going to get. I think that there's a misconception that he's going to get some. I don't consider Chase, even though he was, obviously picked where he was. I I think the distance between Danielle Hunter and Chase Young is pretty significant, right? Like, and so I feel like you're right that Hunter is definitely going to set the market. I would be surprised if Chase Young got the big deal that everyone's kind of anticipating him getting, just because
I won't be either. It's so interesting to me that the 49ers have spent a bunch of money on pass rushers this year, like Leonard Floyd and Yetur Gross-Matos. They gave quite a bit of money to, which is wild, but just no intention of signing Chase Young. We haven't heard a whisper about Chase Young. And I know the 49er fans are all saying, we'll get a comp pick for him. That's why we traded a 3rd round pick. I'm not sure you're going to get a comp pick really at all for him. I wouldn't be surprised if he signs a deal that's similar to Floyd or Gross-Matos, and maybe that tells us everything we need to know about Chase Young.
Yeah, I mean, especially considering the fact that he's like 6 years younger than those two guys, right? And doesn't have any production. So, the market there is going to be interesting, and maybe the Cowboys could get him for a really cheap deal. I mean, I'm certainly not opposed to a Chase Young on a very, very cheap deal, but not nearly the number that was being bandied about here.
The only other position I'm going to say is linebacker. We saw quite a few linebackers get signed yesterday, and even some of the guys that we were looking, like Shahir went for like $11 million a year, which is
went to
Frankie Luvu signed for quite a bit. There's still some linebackers out there. We're still waiting on some Patrick Queen news. There's Jerome Baker. There's Devin White. There's Josie Jewell, Willie Gay, Tyrell Dotson, somebody who I like a lot from Buffalo. Eric Kendricks, who we talked about in the show. So it seems like we're still waiting on some more linebacker news, but that's another position that I think stretches pretty well.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this all offseason. Like, they don't really need numbers at that position. They just need one solid player. So I'll be curious to see if that's a spot that they maybe attack in free agency over the next 48 hours. The other thing that, just really quickly, Landon, I feel like before they can go out and sign a linebacker, they've got to get this Leighton Vander Esch thing resolved.
Yeah.
Because he's not costing them a ton of money, but he is tying up like $3 million that could potentially go to another linebacker. I wonder if we'll get some news on Vander Esch sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I would imagine it's probably a very difficult situation, right? Like, I mean, because essentially you're kind of giving Leighton Vander Esch the room to make a career decision that, you've kind of already decided a little bit, but you want to give Leighton the space to kind of make the decision and do it on his own terms. Meanwhile, you really need that money that Leighton's contract has allocated. And it's not like you're taking the money from Leighton, but it's more just that, like, you need the roster mechanism to kind of free it up for you to spend more than anything. So
correct.
Cowboys are trying to do the right thing by Leighton here, but it's also kind of costing them, the money opportunity a little bit. So, yes, I do expect hopefully an announcement sooner than later. It feels like the writing's been on the wall here for a while, so hopefully this won't drag on too long. Not because I don't want Leighton to feel healthy or come back, but mostly because it feels like this is something that's already decided and
in the works.
And so I just hope that everyone can make a decision in a timely manner that makes everyone feel comfortable. And I think it'll hopefully free things up a little bit more for the Cowboys, especially in the linebacker front.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see what happens there, because I do expect the Cowboys to sign at least one veteran linebacker. And like I said, there's quite a few of them there. I think they'd be better off to try to get on that market before it really dries up. So keep an eye out there. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.